Imagine a pattern so persistent that every empire in history has fallen victim to it. A single recurring mistake, invisible to most at the moment, yet fatal in the long run. Rome, the British Empire, even the Soviet Union, they all stumbled over the same hidden trap. And today, evidence suggests that America may be repeating it. By 2026, if history's lessons go ignored, the consequences could be severe. Not because of one bad decision, not because of luck, but because of a structural pattern that repeats itself like clockwork. What is this mistake? Why does it catch every superpower off guard? And most importantly, what does it mean for the future of the United States? Stay with me, because understanding this one recurring error could change the way you see the economy, finance, and global power. History is not random. Superpowers rise and fall in cycles, often decades apart, yet sharing a strikingly similar trajectory. At first they expand. Wealth pours in, confidence grows, trade networks flourish, armies grow, and technology propels them forward. Everything seems unstoppable. Rome, at its height, controlled a quarter of the world's population. Its roads, aqueducts, and cities were marvels of engineering. Britain, centuries later, dominated global trade and colonized continents. The Soviet Union, though short-lived, amassed influence across half the globe. Yet in each case, a subtle but critical vulnerability emerged. One that wasn't military strength, one that wasn't foreign competition, and one that wasn't a sudden crisis. It was financial, a systemic overextension, a gap between ambition and sustainable resources. Rome overextended its borders, spending far more on defense than on infrastructure or internal stability. Britain financed wars and colonies beyond its capacity, relying on debt and over-leveraged markets. The Soviet Union attempted to maintain a global sphere while its domestic economy lagged behind. And in every case, this mistake unfolded slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it became irreversible. The population didn't notice at first because life seemed normal, even prosperous. But cracks appeared, often in the form of inflation, political tension, or unmanageable debt. By the time leaders realized the scope, it was too late to course correct without significant collapse. Here's the part nobody talks about. It's not just spending, it's not just debt. It's how the system prioritizes appearances over sustainability. And that's exactly what today's United States is showing signs of doing. Take Rome. For centuries, the empire expanded its borders with astonishing speed. Each victory required more soldiers, more fortifications, and more supply chains. The government financed these campaigns with taxes and, crucially, with debt. But Rome faced a hidden constraint. Its internal economy could not match the cost of its external ambitions. Grain, trade, and tax collection were stretched thin. Inflation rose, currency was devalued. Social unrest simmered beneath the surface. Historians often focus on barbarian invasions as the cause of Rome's fall, but the truth is more systemic. By the time foreign threats appeared, Rome's internal financial and structural weaknesses had already set the stage for collapse. This is the first lesson. When the cost of maintaining power exceeds the system's sustainable resources, decline becomes inevitable, even if no single catastrophic event occurs. Fast forward nearly a millennium, the British Empire controlled vast territories across continents. Its navy was unmatched, its trade network sophisticated. But maintaining this reach came at enormous expense. Wars, colonial administration, and the logistics of empire drained resources. Debt was used to bridge gaps, often financed by bonds purchased domestically and internationally. The economy looked strong on the surface, industrial revolutions, global trade dominance, but cracks were appearing beneath the veneer. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Britain faced rising competition from industrializing nations like Germany and the United States. Its global reach, once an advantage, became a liability. Every overextension increased vulnerability. Eventually, the empire's relative power declined, not in a single moment, but gradually, as a direct consequence of systemic overreach. Notice a pattern? Rome, Britain, the Soviet Union, they all fell not to immediate disasters, but to a structural imbalance that grew invisible over time. And today, that same structural imbalance is appearing again right under our eyes. The Soviet Union provides a more modern example. By the 1970s, it was a superpower in global politics, boasting nuclear arsenals, a massive military, and satellite states around the world. Yet, its domestic economy struggled. Agricultural inefficiencies, technological stagnation, and central planning created bottlenecks. Maintaining global influence consumed resources far beyond what the economy could produce sustainably. The system relied on internal repression and external dominance, but those tools could not replace true economic stability. Eventually, the cracks could no longer be ignored. Shortages, public dissatisfaction, and internal inefficiencies converged. By the late 1980s, the Soviet system collapsed, and what's striking is how predictable the collapse was, if one knew where to look. The lesson: ignoring financial and structural limits leads to inevitable decline. This is the same invisible mistake that threatens any superpower: past or present. So, what is this one recurring mistake that all superpowers make? It's deceptively simple. Overextension without sustainable resources. It's the pursuit of influence, prestige, and power at a pace that exceeds the economy's ability to support it. Not through a single bad war or decision, but through structural choices that prioritize perception and ambition over stability and longevity. Debt accumulates quietly. Infrastructure decays quietly. Social and economic inequality widens. Confidence remains high, even as cracks spread beneath the surface. Superpowers always assume they can adjust, adapt, or innovate fast enough, but history shows that adaptation often comes too late. And here's the part that should make anyone concerned. America today shows multiple signs of this exact pattern, in ways that mirror Rome, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The evidence is subtle, but it's there. Consider the United States today. Its global military presence, complex trade networks, and international commitments are unprecedented. Maintaining them consumes enormous resources, often financed through borrowing and debt. Domestically, inequality is widening. Infrastructure challenges persist. Social safety nets are under strain. Inflation and financial imbalances quietly echo the patterns of previous superpowers before their decline. Economic growth remains visible, but it masks the hidden structural vulnerabilities. Just as Rome's roads and aqueducts seemed impervious, and Britain's navy seemed invincible, today's economic indicators give a false sense of security. The risk is not in one headline event, it is systemic, structural, and gradual. The contrast is clear. Rome expanded too quickly and relied on debt. Britain financed global domination while domestic resources lagged. The Soviet Union tried to maintain influence beyond economic reality. Today, America combines all three challenges: massive global influence, debt accumulation, and internal structural strain. Yet, unlike previous empires, modern data allows us to spot these patterns early. We can see the gaps developing before they fully materialize. But spotting them is not the same as correcting them. History shows that even societies with warning signs often fail to act until the effects are undeniable. And here's what most people miss. The timing of decline is never obvious. Sometimes it comes in a decade. Sometimes it takes generations. But the trajectory, once set, is remarkably consistent. By examining today's indicators, we can begin to understand where the United States stands on that curve. Economist historian Peter Turchin calls these patterns structural demographic cycles. In simpler terms, empires rise and fall based on predictable imbalances between ambition, resources, and population pressures. Rome, Britain, the Soviet Union, they all followed similar cycles. At first, wealth and influence grow faster than the underlying economy can sustain. Debt increases, inequality grows, and the system stretches itself thin. Eventually, internal pressures converge with external challenges and decline accelerates. Modern America shows multiple points along this same curve. From fiscal deficits to social unrest, from global military commitments to domestic debt, the indicators mirror history's warning signs. And here's the chilling reality. Unlike in the past, the global system is more interconnected, meaning ripple effects could be faster and more disruptive. Now, let's look at the evidence that America may be following the same path, and why the timing feels more precarious than ever. Consider the United States' debt trajectory. Government borrowing is not inherently bad. Nations often use debt to invest in growth, but history teaches us that debt becomes dangerous when it outpaces economic productivity and is used to maintain influence beyond what the domestic economy can support. Rome borrowed to maintain distant borders. Britain borrowed to fund colonies. The Soviet Union relied on internal pressure and resource allocation far beyond sustainable levels. Today, the United States is running deficits at record levels while maintaining unprecedented global commitments. On paper, growth appears steady. In reality, the system is stretched. Take military expenditure as another example. Maintaining global presence requires logistics, personnel, and infrastructure. Each overseas deployment, each technological upgrade, each commitment to allies comes at a cost. For decades, the United States has funded these commitments through borrowing and complex financial instruments. The consequence is subtle. The economy continues, but resources are siphoned towards sustaining influence rather than internal stability. Here's what makes the situation particularly concerning. Unlike previous empires, America's global obligations interact with a highly interconnected economy. Cracks in one sector ripple through the entire system more quickly than they ever did in Rome or Britain. The world's financial networks now amplify strain, creating a pressure cooker effect beneath the surface calm. Domestic challenges add another layer. Infrastructure is aging, inequality is widening, and social services face strain. Much like Rome's aqueducts deteriorating under the weight of military expansion, America's internal systems are being pressured by external ambitions. And just as with historical empires, these pressures are not immediately visible. They manifest slowly, quietly, and often only become undeniable when the system is near a tipping point. Let's examine economic indicators that echo historical precedents. Inflation, for instance, erodes the real value of wages and savings. It quietly shifts resources away from sustainable growth into short-term stabilization. Rome experienced similar pressures when currency debasement undermined public confidence. Britain faced financial strain when debt servicing consumed a growing portion of national revenue. The Soviet Union struggled to meet domestic demands while projecting power abroad. Patterns repeat. And yet, America has additional complexity. Its economy is enormous, dynamic, and resilient in ways Rome and Britain never were. Technology, innovation, and global trade provide buffers that previous empires lacked. This is why decline, if it occurs, is unlikely to be sudden. It is slow, structural, and difficult to detect until effects accumulate. This also explains why so few recognize the warning signs. The system continues to function, but at increasing cost. Social cohesion is another factor. Historical empires often faltered not just because of economic strain, but because internal divisions made collective action more difficult. Rome faced political infighting and class tension. Britain saw social unrest over taxation and inequality. The Soviet Union struggled with legitimacy and popular support. In America today, polarization and distrust of institutions compound structural pressures, creating vulnerabilities that may amplify systemic strain. But here's a critical insight. These pressures are not destiny. Awareness is the first step toward mitigation. Empires fail when they ignore the invisible warning signs, when short-term optics outweigh long-term stability. America has the data, the historical context, and the institutional tools to recognize patterns before they become irreversible. The question is not whether the potential exists, it always has, but whether lessons are learned in time. Now, consider global competition. Unlike Rome, which faced barbarian tribes, or Britain, which faced rising industrial nations at a slower pace, America exists in a hyper-connected global economy. Shocks in one region propagate instantly through markets, trade, and finance. This interconnectedness is a double-edged sword. It accelerates growth in good times, but magnifies strain in bad times. The invisible mistake of overextension becomes more acute because leverage is no longer isolated. It reverberates worldwide. Even so, the indicators remain nuanced. Markets fluctuate, debt ratios appear manageable, and innovation continues to drive growth. This is precisely why history often deceives us. Empires do not collapse in a single headline. They unravel quietly through compounding structural imbalances until suddenly the trajectory is unmistakable. The pattern is slow, invisible, and entirely predictable in hindsight. And here is the part that shocks many economists. Certain metrics that preceded past collapses are already present in America. Debt to GDP ratios, fiscal imbalances, overextended global commitments, internal inequality, all align with historical precedents. Rome, Britain, and the Soviet Union each exhibited similar alignments decades before their decline became obvious. Yet, the narrative of inevitability is rarely discussed openly because the system continues to function day to day, masking deeper structural strain. Timing remains the final uncertainty. Empires often endure longer than skeptics expect, precisely because adaptation and innovation delay decline. America has unprecedented resilience, yet history suggests that resilience has limits. Once overextension overwhelms internal resources, adjustment becomes painful and unavoidable. That is the invisible risk, the slow creep of structural imbalance. This is where historical perspective becomes invaluable. By comparing indicators across centuries, a pattern emerges. First, ambition exceeds domestic capacity. Then, debt rises. Next, inequality and internal pressure accumulate. Finally, external shocks. Wars, recessions, or market crises trigger acceleration toward decline. America has navigated several stages successfully, but the alignment of pressures is closer than most realize. And here's the most important insight. Unlike Rome or Britain, America has the advantage of awareness. Today, we can measure debt, track global commitments, analyze economic and social trends. The structural mistake is visible before collapse becomes inevitable. Recognition allows adaptation, reform, and mitigation if action is taken before the point of no return. Yet, the question remains, will it be enough? History does not repeat itself precisely, but it rhymes. Every superpower before has stumbled over the same invisible pitfall. America, by mirroring historical patterns, risks following the same trajectory. The difference lies not in inevitability, but in timing, choices, and awareness. Understanding these dynamics is more than an academic exercise. It is a lens for interpreting policy, finance, and global power. It is a framework for assessing risk, not panic, and for preparing, not reacting. The invisible mistake exists, but its consequences are neither immediate nor unavoidable. They are contingent on choices made now. So as you watch headlines, analyze markets, and consider global developments, keep in mind this pattern. Every empire that overreached collapsed. Every empire that ignored structural strain faced consequences. America shows many of the same signs. The future is uncertain, the timing unknown, but the alignment of factors is unmistakable. If this is resonating so far, consider this. Understanding the structural patterns of history offers more insight than any daily news cycle. It allows perspective, foresight, and reflection. And in a system as complex as today's global economy, reflection may be the most valuable tool of all. The question now is not whether mistakes have been made. The question is whether they will be corrected before historical patterns, once again, assert themselves. And that is a question we, collectively, will be answering in real time. By studying the past, we see not only risk, but opportunity. The opportunity to learn, adapt, and prevent structural errors before they escalate. Rome, Britain, the Soviet Union, empires with great achievements yet vulnerable to the same invisible trap. America today sits at a crossroads: recognition, adjustment, and resilience, or repetition, overextension, and potential decline. The final thought to carry forward is this: history does not dictate destiny, but it does illuminate the paths that are most likely. Every empire that overreached fell. Every empire that ignored structural limits faced consequences. America has the advantage of hindsight, the data of the present, and the capacity to act. The only question is how wisely that advantage is used. And as you reflect on these patterns, consider your own position within the system, your finances, your investments, your understanding of global dynamics. Because the invisible mistake is not only a story of empires, it is a story of the systems we all rely upon and the choices we make within them.